Alexander the Great is remembered as one of the greatest battlefield commanders in history. But when his story began, nothing about his future looked certain. He was only a young king who had inherited a kingdom that was still fragile. Across the world stood the Persian Empire, the richest and most powerful empire on earth. It stretched across 3 continents, ruled millions of people, and commanded armies so large they seemed impossible to defeat. Against such a giant, Alexander's small Macedonian army looked as if it had no chance. Then came the battle that almost ended everything. One mistake would destroy his kingdom. One defeat would erase the dream his father had spent a lifetime building. Yet what happened on that battlefield did the exact opposite. In a single day, a young king stepped out of history's shadows and became a legend whose name would be remembered for more than 2,000 years. How did a 22-year-old king defeat the most powerful empire on earth? And why did one single battle change history forever? The answer begins years before swords clashed and armies marched. Before Alexander became a conqueror, Macedonia was a kingdom that few people respected. The great Greek city-states often looked down on it as poor, rough, and uncivilized. While Greece argued with itself, the Persian Empire ruled lands from Egypt to India, growing richer and stronger with every generation. Then one man began to change everything. His name was Philip II. He transformed Macedonia into a military power unlike anything the ancient world had seen. More importantly, he prepared a young prince to lead it even further than he ever could. To understand the battle that made Alexander a legend, we have to begin long before the armies ever met. Long before Alexander became famous, Greece was not one united country. It was a collection of independent city-states, each proud of its own people, laws, and army. Athens was known for its learning and powerful navy. Sparta was feared for its disciplined soldiers. Thebes had become a strong military force. Instead of working together, these cities often fought one another. Years of war weakened them. Every victory was followed by another conflict, and every alliance seemed to fall apart. While the Greeks argued over power, another empire watched from the east. Persia ruled a vast land that stretched from Egypt to the mountains of Central Asia. Its kings controlled millions of people and collected great wealth from many nations. To most people, no kingdom could ever challenge such a giant. Far to the north stood Macedonia. Many Greeks looked down on it. They believed the Macedonians were rough farmers and mountain warriors who lacked the culture and education of the southern cities. They laughed at their customs and dismissed their kings. Few believed this quiet kingdom would ever shape history. It seemed too poor, too distant, and too divided to matter. Yet history often changes in the places that people ignore. Everything began to change when Philip II became king. He inherited a kingdom surrounded by enemies and weakened by years of trouble. Many rulers would have fought one battle after another, hoping for quick victories. Philip chose a different path. He understood that winning wars started long before soldiers reached the battlefield. First, he rebuilt his army. His greatest change was a new weapon called the sarissa. It was a spear almost twice as long as the ones used by most Greek soldiers. When thousands of men stood shoulder to shoulder with these long spears pointing forward, they formed a moving wall of sharp points. An enemy could barely reach the front line before facing several spear tips at once. The formation became known as the Macedonian phalanx. It moved like the gears inside a well-built machine. Every soldier depended on the man beside him. If one failed, the whole line could break. But if everyone held their place, the formation became incredibly difficult to stop. Philip did not rely on the phalanx alone. He trained cavalry to strike quickly at weak points and taught his commanders to adapt instead of following the same plan in every battle. His army became faster, stronger, and more disciplined than any force Macedonia had ever seen. It was not built on courage alone. It was built on careful training, smart leadership, and constant practice. Watching all of this was a young prince named Alexander. He saw his father inspect the troops, reward brave soldiers, and study every victory and every mistake. These lessons would shape the rest of his life. Philip was not simply building an army, he was creating the greatest military machine of the ancient world. But who would inherit this unstoppable machine? Alexander was born into a world where war shaped the future of kingdoms. From the beginning, he was surrounded by powerful people with very different personalities. His father, Philip II, believed strength, discipline, and smart planning could overcome almost any enemy. His mother, Olympias, was deeply religious and fiercely ambitious. She filled her son with stories of heroes like Achilles, the great warrior of the Iliad. She wanted Alexander to believe he was meant for greatness. Between his father's military lessons and his mother's powerful dreams, the young prince grew up believing that ordinary success would never be enough. Philip also understood that a future king needed more than skill with a sword. He needed a sharp mind. To guide his son's education, Philip chose one of the greatest thinkers of the ancient world, Aristotle. Under his teacher, Alexander studied history, science, medicine, geography, and philosophy. He learned that every question deserved careful thought and that every decision carried consequences. Aristotle encouraged him to understand different cultures instead of simply fearing them. These lessons would later help Alexander rule lands far beyond Macedonia. Even as a boy, Alexander showed unusual courage. One famous story tells of a wild horse that no one could control. The animal kicked, bit, and threw every rider who came near. Many believed the horse was impossible to tame, but Alexander noticed something others had missed. The horse became frightened whenever it saw its own shadow. Instead of forcing it into battle, he calmly turned it toward the sun, so the shadow disappeared. Speaking softly, he gained the horse's trust before climbing onto its back. The horse accepted him without a fight. Its name was Bucephalus, and it would carry Alexander through many of his greatest victories. The moment showed an important lesson. Great leaders do not only rely on strength, they notice what others overlook. As Alexander grew older, he began proving himself on real battlefields. At just 16, while Philip was away on campaign, Alexander ruled Macedonia as regent. When a nearby tribe rebelled, he acted quickly, defeated the uprising, and founded a new city. 2 years later, he fought beside his father at the Battle of Chaeronea. There, he led a cavalry charge that helped break the famous Sacred Band of Thebes. The young prince was no longer simply watching history, he was helping to shape it. Then, everything changed without warning. In 336 BC, during a public celebration, Philip II was assassinated. His death shocked the kingdom. At only 20 years old, Alexander became king of Macedonia. Many believed he was too young to hold together the powerful army his father had created. Others expected the kingdom to fall apart within months. The news of Philip's death spread quickly across Greece. City after city sensed an opportunity. Old enemies believed Macedonia had finally become weak again. Revolts began to rise, and leaders who had once obeyed Philip prepared to break free. Alexander had inherited the strongest army in Greece, but also the greatest danger it had ever faced. Could this young king survive his first test? The moment Philip II died, many people believed the Macedonian Empire would collapse. The Greek city-states had obeyed Philip because they respected his strength. They did not yet fear his young son. Across Greece, old rivals saw a chance to break free. Rumors spread that Alexander had been killed by tribes in the north. Leaders who had once accepted Macedonian rule began preparing for rebellion. They believed the 20-year-old king would be too slow, too weak, or too inexperienced to stop them. They were wrong. Alexander understood that hesitation would only encourage more revolts. He moved with incredible speed. Instead of waiting for his enemies to grow stronger, he marched across Greece before many cities even realized he was coming. His quick action shocked everyone. One by one, cities that had planned to rebel chose to surrender instead. They saw that the young king possessed the same determination as his father, but with even greater energy. Only one great city refused to give in. Thebes had once been one of the strongest military powers in Greece. Its leaders believed they could defeat Macedonia if other cities joined them. They closed their gates and prepared for war. Alexander offered them a chance to surrender peacefully, but they refused. They believed the young king would eventually retreat. Instead, he surrounded the city. When the fighting began, it was fierce. Macedonian soldiers broke through the walls after heavy fighting in the streets. The battle ended with a complete victory for Alexander. Much of Thebes was destroyed. Thousands of people were killed, and many more were sold into slavery. It was one of the harshest decisions Alexander would ever make. Yet even in victory, he showed limits. He ordered that the city's temples should not be destroyed. Sacred places were spared, and the house of the famous poet Pindar was also protected out of respect for his work. Alexander wanted Greece to understand an important message. Those who accepted peace would receive fairness. Those who chose rebellion would face severe consequences. The destruction of Thebes sent a powerful warning across the Greek world. Cities that had been thinking about revolt quickly changed their minds. Fear spread faster than any army could march. One after another, the Greek city-states accepted Alexander's authority. The rebellion was over almost as quickly as it had begun. With Greece finally united, the League of Corinth met once again. Just as they had recognized Philip before him, the Greek leaders now confirmed Alexander as their commander. They agreed to support his greatest goal, an invasion of the Persian Empire. For generations, the Greeks had remembered the Persian invasions of their homeland. Now, for the first time, they would carry the war into Persian territory. Alexander had secured his kingdom. His father's military machine was now fully under his command. The soldiers were trained, the cities were quiet, and the road to Asia lay open before them. The challenge ahead was unlike anything Greece had ever faced. Across the sea waited the richest empire on earth, with countless soldiers, endless resources, and a king who believed no enemy could threaten his throne. Now, the impossible begins. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander stood at the edge of Europe and looked across a narrow strip of water called the Hellespont. Beyond it lay Asia, the heart of the Persian Empire. Behind him stood about 40,000 soldiers who had trusted him enough to leave their homes and march into unknown lands. Ahead waited an empire that had ruled for more than 200 years. There would be no easy return. Once they crossed the water, every victory would have to be earned. For Alexander, this journey meant more than conquering new land. He believed he was following in the footsteps of the heroes he had admired since childhood. After crossing the Hellespont, he traveled to the ancient city of Troy. According to Greek tradition, this was where the legendary Trojan War had been fought centuries earlier. Alexander visited the tomb of Achilles, the warrior his mother had taught him to admire. He honored the fallen hero and reflected on the kind of leader he wanted to become. To Alexander, history was not just something to remember, it was something to live. The Persian leaders in Western Asia quickly realized that the Macedonians could not be ignored. Local governors, known as satraps, gathered their armies near the Granicus River. They believed they could stop the invasion before it reached deeper into the empire. If Alexander failed here, his campaign might end before it had truly begun. The Battle of the Granicus was Alexander's first major test against Persian forces. Many of his experienced commanders warned him not to attack immediately. The river was deep, the banks were steep, and the enemy waited on the opposite side. Charging across seemed almost impossible. Alexander chose to attack anyway. He led the assault from the front, riding with his companion cavalry into the rushing water. The fighting became fierce as Macedonian soldiers struggled to climb the muddy riverbank while Persian warriors struck from above. At one point, Alexander found himself surrounded. An enemy noble raised his weapon and nearly killed him. In the final moment, one of Alexander's closest companions cut down the attacker and saved the young king's life. Slowly, the Macedonian army pushed forward. Their discipline and training began to overpower the Persian lines. Once the cavalry broke through, the rest of the army followed. The Persian forces collapsed, and many fled the battlefield. The victory at the Granicus changed everything. It proved that the Persian army could be defeated. One by one, the Greek cities along the coast of Asia Minor opened their gates to Alexander. Many welcomed him as a liberator instead of a conqueror, because they had lived under Persian rule for generations. Alexander often allowed these cities to govern themselves, earning support instead of fear. News of the defeat spread across the empire. At last, the Persian king, Darius III, understood that this was no small border raid. A determined enemy had entered his empire, and the local governors had failed to stop him. Now Darius would take command himself. The real battle was still coming. The defeat at the Granicus shocked the Persian Empire, but it did not break it. King Darius III now decided to lead the war himself. He gathered an enormous army from across his empire. Soldiers came from many different lands, speaking different languages, and carrying different weapons. There were Persian nobles, Greek mercenaries, archers, cavalry, and thousands of infantry. The numbers were far greater than anything Alexander could command. Darius believed that once the two armies met, the young Macedonian king would simply disappear beneath the weight of the Persian force. Alexander knew he could not win by matching numbers with numbers. His greatest strength was not the size of his army. It was the discipline of his soldiers and the speed of his decisions. The two armies finally met near the town of Issus in southern Asia Minor in 333 BC. At first, the battlefield seemed to favor neither side. Mountains stood on one side, while the sea lay on the other. Between them stretched a narrow plain cut by the Panaris River. Darius had brought a huge army, but the land gave him little room to use it. Many of his soldiers were crowded together, unable to fight at the same time. The very size that made his army so frightening had become a weakness. Alexander saw the opportunity immediately. He placed the strong Macedonian phalanx in the center to hold the Persian line in place. Their long sarissas formed a wall of sharp points that slowed every attack. On the left, his commanders focused on defense. But on the right, Alexander gathered his finest soldiers, the companion cavalry. These men had trained beside him for years. They trusted his judgment, and he trusted their courage. The battle began with a violent clash across the river. Persian arrows filled the air as Macedonian soldiers pushed through the water under heavy attack. The fighting became fierce. Men struggled over rocks and muddy banks, while shields crashed together and spears splintered. For a moment, the outcome remained uncertain. Then, Alexander made his move. Leading from the front as he always did, he charged with the companion cavalry directly toward the heart of the Persian army. Instead of attacking everywhere, he struck one critical point with overwhelming force. It was like pushing against the weakest stone in a great wall. Once that stone fell, the rest of the wall began to collapse. The charge broke through the Persian line and drove straight toward Darius himself. As the fighting moved closer, the Persian king watched his soldiers fall back around him. Fear spread through the center of the army. If the king was captured or killed, the battle would be lost. Darius made a choice that changed history. He turned his chariot and fled from the battlefield. The moment the Persian king escaped, panic swept through his army. Soldiers who had stood firm only moments before began throwing down their weapons and running. What had started as an organized army became a frightened crowd trying to escape. The Macedonians pressed forward, turning victory into complete collapse. When the fighting ended, Alexander entered the Persian camp. There he found something no one had expected. Darius had escaped, but his mother, wife, daughters, and other members of the royal family had been left behind. They feared they would be treated as prisoners or slaves. Instead, Alexander surprised everyone. He ordered that they be treated with respect and protected from harm. He understood that true strength was not shown only in battle, but also in how a victor treated the defeated. The Battle of Issus was far more than another victory. It shattered the belief that the Persian king could never be beaten. The richest empire on earth had faced a young king with a smaller army and lost. From that day forward, Alexander was no longer simply the ruler of Macedonia. This was the exact moment Alexander became a legend. The victory at Issus made Alexander famous, but it did not end the war. King Darius III was still alive, and the Persian Empire still stretched across much of Asia. Alexander understood that chasing Darius immediately would leave powerful Persian ports behind him. As long as the Persian navy could use those ports, his own army would remain in danger. Before he could destroy the empire, he first had to cut away its strength along the Mediterranean coast. His greatest challenge was the city of Tyre. Tyre stood on an island just off the coast, protected by high stone walls and the sea itself. Its people believed no army could ever capture it. When Alexander asked the city to surrender peacefully, the leaders refused. They trusted their walls and their ships. They believed the young king had finally reached an enemy he could not defeat. Alexander refused to give up. Instead of sailing away, he ordered his soldiers to build a massive stone roadway across the sea toward the island. Day after day, they carried rocks, timber, and earth into the water, while defenders fired arrows and launched attacks from their ships. It was slow, dangerous work. The siege lasted for many months, testing the patience and determination of everyone in the Macedonian army. At last, Alexander's engineers broke through the city's defenses. Tyre fell after one of the hardest battles of his entire campaign. The victory showed that Alexander would not abandon a goal simply because it seemed impossible. If no road existed, he would build one. The next obstacle was Gaza, another strongly defended city, guarding the road to Egypt. Once again, Alexander faced stubborn resistance. Once again, he refused to retreat. After weeks of fierce fighting, Gaza also fell. The path south was finally open. When Alexander entered Egypt in 332 BC, everything changed. Unlike the cities that had resisted him, the Egyptians welcomed him. They had lived under Persian rule for many years and saw Alexander as a liberator rather than a conqueror. Instead of fighting him, they opened their gates. The priests crowned Alexander as Pharaoh, the traditional ruler of Egypt. It was more than a new title. It showed that Alexander was no longer simply the king of Macedonia. He was becoming the ruler of many different peoples and cultures. During his time in Egypt, Alexander founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast. He named it Alexandria after himself. It was planned as a great center for trade, learning, and culture. In the centuries that followed, Alexandria became one of the most famous cities in the ancient world, proving that Alexander wanted to build as well as conquer. But success was beginning to change him. With every victory, his confidence grew stronger. He had crossed seas, defeated mighty armies, captured great cities, and been welcomed as a king in foreign lands. More and more people began to see him as a man chosen by fate. Alexander himself started to believe that his destiny reached beyond the limits of ordinary rulers. Yet one great challenge remained. Darius still ruled the heart of the Persian Empire. His army had been defeated, but not destroyed. Deep in the east, he was gathering new forces for one final attempt to save his kingdom. One final battle remained. In 331 BC, Alexander marched east once again. King Darius III had gathered another massive army for one final stand. This time, he chose a wide, open plain near a village called Gaugamela. Unlike the narrow battlefield at Issus, this land gave the Persian army room to use its full strength. Darius even ordered the ground to be cleared so his chariots could race across it without slowing down. He believed the open field would finally give him the advantage he needed. Once again, Alexander faced an enemy that greatly outnumbered his own army. On the night before the battle, some of Alexander's commanders suggested launching a surprise attack under the cover of darkness. It seemed like the safest choice, but Alexander refused. He wanted to win in daylight, where everyone could see the result. He believed that a clear victory would leave no doubt about who truly deserved to rule. As the sun rose, the two armies moved toward each other. Darius placed thousands of soldiers across the wide plain, hoping to surround the Macedonians. Alexander knew standing still would be a mistake. Instead, he led his army forward at an angle, pulling part of the Persian line away from its strongest position. Slowly, a gap began to appear near the center of the Persian army. It was the chance Alexander had been waiting for. Leading the companion cavalry, he charged directly into the opening. The attack struck with incredible speed and power. The Macedonian phalanx held the enemy in place, while the cavalry drove deep toward Darius. Just as at Issus, the battle turned into a race between courage and fear. When Darius saw Alexander riding toward him, he lost confidence. For the second time, the Persian king turned and fled from the battlefield. His soldiers watched their ruler escape, and their will to fight disappeared. The Persian army broke apart, and the Battle of Gaugamela ended in another stunning victory for Alexander. This victory changed the ancient world forever. Alexander marched into Babylon, one of the richest and most beautiful cities on earth. Its gates opened without resistance. Soon after, he entered Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian kings. The city was filled with treasures gathered over generations. Gold, silver, and priceless works of art showed the incredible wealth of the empire. Then came one of the most debated moments of Alexander's life. The great royal palace at Persepolis was set on fire. Some ancient writers believed it was a planned act of revenge for the Persian invasion of Greece many years earlier. Others believed it happened during a celebration that went too far. Whatever the reason, the flames destroyed one of the greatest symbols of Persian power. With Persepolis fallen, the Persian Empire could no longer survive. The empire that had ruled millions across 3 continents had collapsed. But victory brought new challenges. Alexander no longer ruled only Macedonians and Greeks. He ruled Persians, Egyptians, Babylonians, and many other peoples. To unite his growing empire, he began wearing Persian clothing at times and adopted some Persian royal customs. He believed respecting local traditions would help hold his empire together. Many of his own men disagreed. The soldiers who had followed him from Macedonia felt that their king was changing. They feared he was leaving behind the customs of his own people. Quiet complaints grew louder as the campaign continued. The farther Alexander marched, the greater the distance became between him and the men who had helped build his empire. He had defeated the greatest empire on earth. His greatest enemy was no longer Persia, it was himself. After defeating Persia, Alexander had reached a height that few leaders in history had ever imagined. But he was not finished. His ambition pushed him farther east, beyond the borders of the Persian Empire and toward lands that were unknown to most Greeks. His next destination was India. In 326 BC, Alexander crossed into the Indian subcontinent and faced new enemies, unfamiliar landscapes, and powerful kingdoms. At the Battle of the Hydaspes River, he fought King Porus, a ruler who commanded a strong army that included war elephants. The battle was difficult, but Alexander once again found a way to win. After the victory, something unusual happened. Instead of destroying Porus, Alexander respected his courage and allowed him to continue ruling his lands. But even the strongest armies have limits. For more than a decade, Alexander's soldiers had marched thousands of miles. They had crossed deserts, mountains, and rivers. They had fought countless battles far from home. When Alexander wanted to continue deeper into India, his exhausted soldiers finally refused. They had followed him through every danger, but they believed they had reached their limit. For the first time, Alexander could not convince them to move forward. He was forced to turn back. The journey home was difficult. The army traveled through harsh lands, facing hunger, sickness, and exhaustion. Many soldiers who had marched with Alexander from Macedonia never returned. The dream of conquering the entire world had come with a heavy price. Eventually, Alexander arrived in Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. But something was wrong. The young king, who had survived countless battles, was now facing a challenge no army could defeat. In 323 BC, at only 32 years old, Alexander the Great died. His death shocked the world. He had built one of the largest empires in history, but he left no clear successor strong enough to hold it together. Soon, his generals began fighting for control. The empire Alexander created broke apart into several kingdoms, yet his influence did not disappear. After his death, Greek culture spread across Egypt, Persia, and parts of Asia. This period became known as the Hellenistic world. Greek language, art, science, and ideas blended with local traditions. Cities founded during Alexander's time became centers of learning and trade. Alexandria, in particular, grew into a symbol of knowledge and discovery. Centuries later, archaeologists would continue uncovering evidence of Alexander's world. Ancient ruins, forgotten cities, coins, and writings revealed how far his influence had reached. Historians still study him because Alexander represents one of history's greatest questions. How can one person change the direction of the world? Alexander won almost every battle he fought, yet the empire he built outlived him by only a moment. So what truly makes a conqueror legendary? How much land they seize, or how deeply they change the world? If you enjoyed this journey through history, subscribe for more cinematic history documentaries. And in the next episode, the battle that destroyed the Persian Empire forever.